Woohoo! We're going to get started in just a few minutes, everybody. If you're able to hear, you're listening in, we're going to get started in just a moment or two. I want to give people a chance to get on. And let's make sure that you can type in questions if you have the ability. Type in over there under the questions where you can make comments. Just say hello, something like that, so we know you're there and you can communicate. There you go. Very good. Isabel, you let me know when you can see things. There you
I
go.
can
Thanks,
see
Gregory.
people right away.
Good. That way we know that that part of things are working right there. Well, we know how it is where people, when we say it's at a certain time, they come right in at that time. So I don't know where everybody is who's listening in right now, but it's the dead of winter here for me in Arizona. So the grass is brown and the sun is setting. Let's see if you can see the sunset a little bit right there. The pool is here, but nobody's swimming in the pool right now. So that's what that is. This is usually where I'm kind of hanging out. Ta-da! We have to do an inner circle event, Lo. That's what we should do. It'd be fun.
Yeah.
All right, good. People are coming on. We're going to start in just like 1 or 2 minutes. We'll let some more people flow on here. I hope you're doing well right now. It's the beginning of the year. It's amazing. A lot of things have happened already. I can't believe how much is going on. I know Lo and I were talking earlier today. Our homes are full. Great. Residents are being well taken care of. The homes are full, so that's a good thing. There you go. All right, Lo, you tell me when you want to begin, but
Yeah, I think we can go ahead and get started. And we're a couple minutes after now. And if anybody joins us, we'll obviously have this recorded for them so they can check out anything they missed.
very good. Well, welcome everybody. This is Gene, as you probably have figured it out. And we have, I have a couple of friends here with me, and the reason for doing this whole this event here tonight is there's a lot of people like yourselves that want to get into this industry of assisted living, and you may be in a position to own and operate or do it yourself, or you may be in a position where you want to invest in. And one of the things that I always tell people that if you're looking to get into this industry from an investment standpoint, the operator is the key. So you need to have a really great operator, somebody who knows what they're doing. And in this case, that's what this is all about. There's an opportunity that we're going to share with you at the end of this broadcast right here, where I'm going to introduce these two gentlemen. You can see them on the screen right now to you. And they're going to spend about 35 minutes explaining this to you. Then they'll give you an opportunity to ask questions at the end. So get ready for that, where you'll have an opportunity there. And at the end, if you're interested, they're going to give you the ability to contact them about further information to potentially invest in the project. For those of you who are listening, I want to make sure you're clear in this. This is something that I'm invested in personally, but I'm not enticing you or encouraging you to do it for that reason at all. I want you to make your own decisions. So I want you to listen carefully and learn all you can. And as I introduce these two people to you and they share this whole project with you, you'll make your own decision what's right for you. So first of all, I want to introduce to you Loe Hornbuckle right here. He's been, Loe, we've known each other for how long now?
About 3.5 years.
3.5 years. And I've gotten to know you pretty well and learned a lot of things from you, from not only the memory care, dementia, but just the way you operate. And I've seen your homes, they're first class. You've done a tremendous job. And also in raising capital, you've done a great job. And you're working with us at the RAL Academy, consulting and so on. And it's just a real blessing to have you on the team, getting to know you and working with you. In addition to that, we have Victor Menasce right here. He's coming in from Canada, so he's in the snowy north, and he's going to be here as well. These two are the people behind this project. When they go through it, they're the ones who are going to answer the questions. I wanted to set the table, introduce them to you, and kind of let you know who I am and my position as an investor, but you make your own decisions as we go through this. So I'm going to turn it over to Loe and Victor, and they're going to take it from here.
Thank you, Gene.
You
Yeah,
bet.
thanks for the introduction, Gene. First off, thank everybody who took some time out this evening to attend our presentation. As Gene stated at the beginning, we will have an opportunity for you to have questions answered at the end of this presentation. The presentation should last about 35 to 40 minutes, and we can take as much time as we need to get through some questions. So with that, we'll get started. So the project that we're working on is a boutique assisted living and memory care facility in Lake Charles, Louisiana. This is a private webinar for Residential Assisted Living Academy students. Now, one thing you'll notice in the lower right-hand corner there is that we have several key partners involved in the deal. My company is Sage Oak Assisted Living and Memory Care. U.S. Real Estate Partners is Victor's company, and we have two other partners, actually three other partners in the two other companies who aren't present on this webinar. So it truly is a team effort. So the first thing I'd like to start with is just a little bit of background about who we are as a team. So I won't go through this whole thing, but ultimately I just want to let you know that I'm basically in charge of the project once we get into the construction phase and into the operations period. So I'm the lead sponsor and I'm responsible for the success of the project. So for those of you that don't know me, I have a company here in Dallas, Texas, Sage Oak Assisted Living and Memory Care. We have 40 beds in the Dallas area. I've also worked with the Residential Assisted Living Academy since 2017. I have a pretty extensive background in real estate investing and also sales, marketing, quite a extensive background in business. I've also passively invested, so I've been in the passive role on many different types of projects, multifamily, mobile homes, single family, and also, things like workforce housing, like an RV park. We actually have an RV park project in the area near this project. So we definitely know the market quite well. The rest of the team is comprised of several other individuals. I'll have Victor say a little about himself in just a second. We'll go last with him. So Charlton Holmes is a partner of mine that I've done business with since 2002. Pam and Sharon are both New Orleans natives. The project is located in Lake Charles, Louisiana. We'll talk about Lake Charles a little bit later in the project. Point is, we have people there that are on the ground. Also, too, in the project, we have chosen Louisiana architect, Louisiana general contractors. So the whole idea is we've chosen the top-notch folks from around the area. We also have Dave Zook on the team. Many of you may know Dave. He is the CEO of the Real Asset Investor and recently became the $100 million man. So Dave has raised almost $100 million for various projects over the last 4 to 5 years. And we have Victor on the call. I'll let Victor say just a little bit about himself at this time, and then we'll get into the meat and bones of the project.
Well, thank you, Loe. Pam, Sharon, and I started working in the Lake Charles market back in 2013, and it was clear even at that time, 5 years ago, that there was an extraordinary opportunity. We had a couple of false starts in that market. It took us a little while to find our footing, but we really saw a tremendous amount of opportunity there. And when we finally put the right team together, we found the right assets. We were able to capitalize on that, and the market was a little bit nascent back at that time. We'll talk a little bit more about the market when we get into the presentation. But then when we saw the opportunity for assisted living, that's when we tapped Loe, because he's truly the expert of all the folks that we know in Gene's ecosystem. He really stood out head and shoulders above anyone else as someone who we would want to work with. So we tapped him to join us as a partner in this project. So we're thrilled to have him here with us.
Yeah, thank you. So this is one of those situations where this project found me, and initially I was a bit skeptical because I'm from Louisiana, and my experience from Lake Charles, the last time I was there, I think I was playing poker there in 2003, and I was like, Lake Charles, why aren't we doing an assisted living project down there? And Victor had to kind of talk me into it, and I went down there, toured the market, and was really blown away by what I saw. Did an internal market survey of the existing offerings, the various other assisted living and skilled nursing facilities in the region, and came to the conclusion that they had a real hole in what they were offering, and that a project like what we had in mind would be a perfect offering. So just a couple things to be aware of. This is just something that basically says, hey, to the best of our knowledge, everything we're telling you is accurate, but that any omission or mistake is simply that, an omission or a mistake, not intended to be such. So let's just get into the overall summary of the project. So most of you are familiar with residential assisted living. This project is very similar to a residential assisted living project, but it has some few key differences. So this project is going to be in Lake Charles, Louisiana, which we'll talk about that market extensively further on in the presentation. We're actually going to do a planned care home community. So it's something that you might have heard referred to as a cluster development. I know that's the phrasing Jim uses. We like to call it a planned care home community. The first phase of the construction is going to consist of 5 16-bed homes, so a total of 80 beds, with 48 beds being allocated to assisted living, and then 32 beds being allocated to memory care or dementia care. The site actually has room for 3 additional 16-bed houses, so we potentially could have as many as 128 beds on the site. One thing you want to understand is the project's already been approved unanimously by both the Metropolitan Planning Commission and also the Lake Charles City Council. So the city has basically told us they very much want this project. A couple things I'll talk about at the planned care home community we'll do a little later in the webinar. But ultimately, the thing about a planned care home community is we're trying to take all the benefits you'd have of a big building, and there are some, and all the benefits of a residential assisted living and put them all on one campus. And so we'll show you some examples of the site plan so you really get a sense of what we're trying to do here. But I think you'll understand that there's a lot of advantages to a planned care home community, both in the level of care we can provide the residents, but also in some of the amenities that we can offer, which may be beyond the scope of a traditional residential assisted living. The financial overview is relatively simple. The total deal is about $12.4 million. $4.7 million is going to be equity, and 7.7 is going to be debt in the form of a construction loan, which will automatically convert into a permanent loan at a certain point in the project. And right now we'll talk a little bit more about how the equity is structured, but basically it's a $12.4 million project, 4.7 million in equity, 7.7 million in debt or bank financing. Operations will be the responsibility of a Sage Oak subsidiary. So we're creating Sage Oak Assisted Living and Memory Care of Lake Charles, and that will be the operations company handling the project. Obviously, we have everything set up to where if something were to happen to me, number one, there's going to be a team in place, but number two, obviously a third-party operations company could take over. So there's a very clear line between the operations company and the owners of the business. Right. The basic numbers on the project are pretty straightforward. We basically anticipate getting the project stabilized and doing a refinance, and we'll talk a little bit more about that timeline, to return investor capital, and then from there operating the facility until about the 10-year mark, in which we anticipate selling the property. Investors should see a total return of about 138% over their initial investment, so a profit of 138%. And for those of you that are into the internal rate of return measurement, should be about a 16.4% internal rate of return. We'll talk a little bit about some places where that possibly could improve as well. So the first thing I want to do is, I always feel like when I sit in assisted living presentations or RAL presentations, nobody takes the time to really talk about what's going on in the industry. So I want to take just a couple minutes to kind of tell you what I think is going on in the sort of senior housing assisted living industry. So the first thing is, let's just deal with some basic terminology. So senior housing is multiple different types of housing care that all kind of go into the senior housing umbrella. Independent living, as you see in the upper left-hand corner there, is designed for people that basically are independent and just want to, be around folks that are their age. Assisted living is going to be folks that are maybe similar in age to independent living, but they need a little bit of extra help. So we have something called activities of daily living. There are many, many versions of that, but ultimately things like grooming, toileting, medication, meals, cleaning, those are all things that they're going to need help with. Then you also have a skilled nursing facility. Those are people that are similar to the assisted living, but they need a little bit more care, or they have some kind of complex medical condition that means that an assisted living would no longer be appropriate. You also have in-home care, which is exactly what it sounds like. That's a caregiver basically offering an assisted living service or skilled nursing service in the home. And then you also have memory care or dementia care, which is basically assisted living, except that maybe instead of dealing with mobility challenges, you're dealing with the resident's cognition. So the resident has some sort of cognitive impairment like dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and they need more help with their cognitive skills, although they do often have mobility challenges as well. And then you have residential care home, or what you know as RAL. Many states call them different things, but ultimately what this is these are homes in regular residential neighborhoods designed to be small environments that really offer a better model of care, in our opinion. This project is on a commercial piece of land, but the houses have been made to look exactly like they would if they were in a neighborhood. And the entire project is designed to mimic the look of a residential neighborhood, except for the fact that the houses are maybe 9,000 square feet instead of 3,000 square feet. And instead of a family living in there, you've got 16 seniors and some caregivers that are working there during the day and the evening. So this is just a quick little graph that kind of shows you where things kind of fall in the spectrum in terms of care offered and also cost. Now, the downside to this graph that we got from seniorliving.org is they actually don't recognize on this chart RAL, or residential care homes. So we took the liberty to add that in for you. So you can see there where residential care homes or residential assisted living facilities fall in the spectrum. They actually overlap quite a bit with traditional assisted living, but they also do steal market share from skilled nursing. And we'll talk about that later in the presentation. And it goes all the way up until hospice care. So the thing to understand is the way our model works is we actually offer ourselves as an alternative, in many cases, to skilled nursing and also a higher level of care than assisted living. We don't have a different license. It's the simple matter of fact that we are able to have higher level of care because we have a smaller space to work within and we have more staff per resident, which allows us to work with some clients that would not work very well in the assisted living space. When it comes to dementia care, there's a lot of data out that basically says smaller environments are better for folks with memory loss, dementia, Alzheimer's, things like that. So that gives you kind of an idea about where this falls in the spectrum. One thing to be aware of is we are going to be recording this webinar. So if you came in a little late, don't worry, we'll be happy to give you a copy so you can see what you missed. So there's a few industry trends happening right now. So number one, the industry is trending small. So Gene and the Residential Assisted Living Academy and folks like myself are really on the cutting edge of this change. Most operators are considering converting semi-private rooms to private rooms and reinvesting to make units more home-like rather than individual. That's from Lois Bowers, who's a senior editor at McKnight Senior Living. There's a trend, even in big buildings, of attempting to make big assisted living buildings, big skilled nursing facilities, into neighborhoods. That's the terminology that they use. Ultimately, residential assisted living is on the cutting edge of that because it's an actual home as opposed to a home-like environment. The other major thing to talk about is if you read national publications, Wall Street Journal, maybe other major publications like New York Times, Dallas Morning News, they talk a lot about market saturation in assisted living, that basically it's overbuilt. So a couple things I want to make you aware of about that. Number one, be cautious about those articles because often they use the term senior housing. And remember from earlier in the presentation, senior housing encompasses independent living, assisted living, dementia care, skilled nursing. So there's all these different components. So an article that doesn't break out the various asset classes, to me, you have to look at it differently. For example, I read an article that senior housing was in trouble because baby boomers weren't wanting to move in. However, the problem is the average person in assisted living is 87. The oldest baby boomer is 74. So I read that article to mean that basically independent living was in trouble from the baby boomer perspective, not assisted living. The bottom line is if you need care, you're going to move somewhere where care can be provided. So what's interesting about this is a couple things to be aware of. Number one is most of the market saturation is happening in big cities. So Dallas, for example, is often number one on the oversaturated, overbuilt list. And what's kind of interesting is being in the Dallas market right now with Sage Oak. Right now, we are at 100% occupancy with an average rent per bed of about $5,100. So we are not a discount provider of assisted living and dementia care. Rather, we're right in line with the marketplace. We're at 100% occupancy, even though Dallas is quote unquote overbuilt. And we'll talk a little bit about why that is. The thing about Lake Charles is very interesting is Lake Charles would be considered either a secondary or a tertiary market. So either secondary or kind of a third level market. It's close to the big cities like Baton Rouge and New Orleans, but it's not a huge city like you'd have in Dallas or, Phoenix or New York or something along those lines. Most of the overbuilding trend has been in big cities, not in the secondary or tertiary markets. Part of my strategy is I go after these secondary or tertiary markets because we feel like that those markets are being underserved. So while a city like Dallas may be overbuilt, and it may not be an advisable idea to go acquire 15 or 20 acres in Dallas because of the cost of the land and because of the overbuilding, it makes total sense to get 30 or 40 minutes out of Dallas into one of the suburbs and do a project just like this. In fact, we actually have a very similar project to the one in Lake Charles that we're doing in the Dallas suburbs as well. The key here being that basically the Lake Charles market is very underserved, and we'll talk about why we believe that to be the case. The third thing, and this is really important, we don't talk about this near enough in the Residential Assisted Living Academy. Skilled nursing is struggling. So right now, skilled nursing has fallen from 86% census to 82% census in the last 5 years, which is a pretty substantial change. So skilled nursing right now as a standalone offering, meaning when it's not attached to an assisted living or a memory care facility, but rather a standalone, has really started to struggle. And a lot of the reason why that is because market share is being gobbled up by other assisted living facilities because the line between assisted living and skilled nursing has really started to blur. So I want you to understand that these are some of the things that are kind of happening in the industry. So the main key points is that the industry is trending small, that there's a myth that the market is oversaturated. And even if it were oversaturated, you're going to have huge demographic changes that are going to take care of that oversaturation. And then lastly, you have skilled nursing, which is having kind of a hard time right now, in part because the residential assisted living community is starting to take market share from that. So I would be happy to sit down and explain to you what I know about the Lake Charles market, but I would not do it the justice that it deserves. Victor has, frankly, spent more time talking about the Lake Charles market than anybody and has a very good grasp of sort of what goes on in that marketplace. So with that, I'm going to turn over the presentation to Victor for a few minutes to kind of talk to you about why we selected Lake Charles, Louisiana as the market for this project.
Thank you, Loe. Well, this image here of Lake Charles is perhaps one of the greenest images you'll see. Lake Charles is a very industrial city, and one of the reasons it exists, the main reason it exists where it does, is that it is really at the epicenter of a network of natural gas pipelines. It really started out its history as an importation facility. So, back when the United States was importing gas. In fact, if you go back to the days of Richard Nixon, since then, since the Arab oil embargo, the United States has not exported hydrocarbons at all up until a couple of years ago when President Obama opened that up for the first time. With the dramatic growth of both natural gas and oil exploration, especially in the Southeast, those pipelines have been basically turned around, and those pipelines, they can go either direction. So Lake Charles is now an export facility. It used to be strictly import, but now it's an export facility because of that network of natural gas pipelines. Now, whenever we talk about oil and gas, a lot of people start to get a little bit worried and think about, the boom and bust scenarios that existed, for example, in North Dakota, that in East Texas, Midland, Odessa, where the fortunes of the business are really tied to the price of oil. This is not that type of a scenario. When we talk about oil, we talk about petrochemicals, we talk about upstream, midstream, and downstream. Upstream is where the actual drilling occurs. That's very volatile. It's also very nomadic. People will come into town, they'll work for 90 days, they'll erect a huge drilling pad, they'll, drill down 10 miles and do a 30, 40 stage frac, and then put that well online, and then they'll leave. Lake Charles is not that. Lake Charles is midstream. It's all about distribution. If you go back even a couple of years ago, Spain was getting all of its natural gas from Europe. They were not importing any natural gas in the United States. Last year, they imported 29 billion cubic feet of natural gas, predominantly from Lake Charles. So Lake Charles is a town. It's not a huge town. It's a couple of 100,000 people, but it has, and this is not an exaggeration, $118 billion with a B of natural gas, petrochemical, and seaport expansions.
So a town of 200,000 people has about $118 billion in infrastructure projects coming online.
Right.
Wow.
Of which right now there are, why don't you go to the next slide? Right now there's currently about 48 billion under construction, and I expect in the next 30 days there'll be the final approval for another $15 billion project. I'll talk about that one in a minute. So Lake Charles, where it's located, it's directly on Interstate 10. I-10 runs all the way from the Florida Panhandle all the way to Los Angeles along the Gulf Coast. And it's about halfway between Baton Rouge and Houston. 2 hours to Baton Rouge to the east, 2 hours to Houston on the west. So it's right there in the middle of the two. When we talk about natural gas terminals, there's really two names that come up first and foremost. There's Corpus Christi and there's Lake Charles, and by far Lake Charles is the dominant. So these are images of the kind of things that you see in Lake Charles. The picture at the very top, that's the Phillips Conoco refinery. It's kind of your traditional dirty oil kind of image. The natural gas plants that you see, by contrast, look quite clean, and it's because they don't really have a lot of emissions. They're compressing the natural gas, they're putting it on ships. You're getting about a 600 to 1 compression, whether it goes back over to Europe. I'll talk about Europe in a second. Or if you go through the Panama Canal now, with the widening of the Panama Canal, that's opened up some of these natural gas mega tankers to markets in Asia, as well as markets on the Pacific West Coast. So you're not going to get another natural gas pipeline approved through the Rocky Mountains to the Pacific West Coast. I don't care who's in the White House. That's just not going to happen. But putting it on ships and putting it through the Panama Canal is very viable. The other part of this story is the petrochemical industry. So it's not just about transportation or distribution. There are a lot of end product facilities that are locating in Lake Charles, again, because of the presence of the natural gas network. There's an image here of Westlake Chemical. There's Sasol from South Africa. Has a very large facility there. They just opened up what's called an ethane cracker, and that basically takes methane, which is natural gas, converts it to ethane, converts it to ethylene, and ultimately polyethylene. So basically making plastic out of natural gas. There's a number of different petrochemical processes that you will find in Lake Charles, and so there's a lot of these plants. This image here shows the actual locations of the plants. Lake Charles is about 19 miles inland at the end of the Calcasieu shipping channel. The Calcasieu River runs from Lake Charles all the way down to the Gulf Coast. And then there's a number of facilities that are located along that shipping channel. Now, to the south of Lake Charles, you get into, we don't call them counties in Louisiana, we call them parishes. You get into Cameron Parish, which is a very low-lying, very wet area. It was decimated by Hurricane Rita back, I think, 2006, and there's only about 5,800 residents left in the entire parish. It's not really an area that's suitable for building anything residential. So all those people in all those other mega plants, doesn't matter where they work, they will be residing in Lake Charles. And so that's driving a lot of both temporary housing growth, but also a lot of permanent housing growth. Our location in the south end of Lake Charles is in the path of progress, and that is the growth direction for the city. Most of the major plants are kind of to the north or way down right along the Gulf Coast. If you'll notice, just southwest of Lake Charles, you'll see Driftwood LNG. This is one that's about to start construction. They just got their environmental approval about a week ago. Actually, it was announced on the 25th. And that facility alone, that's a $15 billion facility, at least in the first phase. Also includes about 158 kilometers of natural gas pipeline for that facility. They're the only vertically integrated player where they own both the upstream and the midstream. And that facility alone is going to more than double the export capacity of the United States. The U.S. output 20 million tons of natural gas last year, and Driftwood will do 27.6 million metric tons of LNG. So these are extraordinarily large facilities. The G2 facility that you might see there on the map as well, that's another one. That's a 1,200 acre LNG plant. So this gives you the sense for the shadow that, we're in the shadow of literally tens of billions of infrastructure investment. And so there's a ton of growth, and we're here to solve problems for that community, and assisted living is one of them.
Absolutely. So I think one thing to tie in what Victor's talking about is this is not an energy town in the traditional sense. This is an energy infrastructure town. So these are shipping. This is basically the equivalent of airports, right? So airports infrastructure play. They don't pick up and move 15 billion, 20 billion, $30 billion facilities. Regardless, they keep those there. So this is a very long-term, sort of slow-moving, multiple projects happening simultaneously. And ultimately, you're probably wondering, well, okay, there's a lot of stuff happening in town, and what that's done is it's caused a population boom. It's caused the income of the town to increase. It's caused a lot of people to come in from other areas. And so you've just got this huge amount of strain on every single part of the town, all the way from housing to retail, all the way to assisted living. And that's kind of where we come in.
Yeah,
So this
let
is an
me
image.
jump in. Let me jump in
Sure.
one more thing. I mean, this is one of 4 projects that we have underway in Lake Charles. Like Loe
Correct.
said, they need everything. So we started with workforce housing RV park. We're building a multifamily project, which is literally right next door to Sage Oak. We're working on medical office. So there's a number of projects that we have underway, and then there's a couple more in the pipeline that we haven't talked publicly about at all. So back to you.
Absolutely. So this is this is just kind of an image of kind of the architectural rendering of the project that we're doing. So you can see obviously that it's sort of residential in nature. The only thing that kind of makes it look a little bit commercial is that we do have the covered pull in there. That's just designed for resident convenience. One of the things most people with residential assisted living will tell you is you really wish you had that. Gene doesn't really have to worry about that because in Phoenix they don't have a thing called rain. And so for us in the rest of the country, we have to worry about how to keep our residents dry if they ever go out of the house or have to go out for any kind of medical service or anything. So just to give you kind of an idea about the project overview, we've completed phase 1 of the project, meaning we've gotten approval from the city, entitled the land, and subdivided the land up. So what this would be a possible investment into would be phase 2, which will consist of 6 buildings. One of the buildings is a standalone admin and sales office, and then 5 assisted living houses, 16 beds each, for a total of 80 residents. Now, there also will be an option for a phase 3. Phase 3 would be building up to 48 additional beds, which would be 3 additional homes at 16 beds each. So what we're currently raising money for is for phase 2 with an option to participate in phase 3, and we'll talk about phase 3 in just a couple minutes. So one of the things I mentioned is when I said that, hey, we're at 100% occupancy and Dallas is a sort of an oversaturated market. And the key to this, and for those of you that have met me at the Residential Assisted Living Academy, I talk a lot about unique selling proposition. And remember, I mentioned to you that the trend in assisted living and senior housing in general is getting smaller. Well, Sage Oak in particular has managed to kind of carve out a very key niche because a lot of care homes and a lot of parts of the country or residential assisted living facilities aren't that nice. And so there's those people that want smaller environments, but they also want to feel like they have, great natural light and they look good and they're fully ADA compliant. And so what ends up happening is residents and families are getting smarter and smarter to the fact that it's not about gyms, it's not about chandeliers, it's not about pool tables. It's about great care, great food, and great communication. And one of the things that we've really done as a company in Dallas is be able to tell that story so that people instantly understand what it is that we're about. And so that's what we plan to bring to the Lake Charles market. And I got to tell you, the thing about Lake Charles that's fascinating is touring all their other properties, there are no high-end, nice facilities. So our working theory right now, especially based on the backing of our feasibility study that we conducted, is that there are plenty of people that have the money and there are plenty of people that are old enough to need this product. So what they're doing is one of two things. They're either staying home and paying for around the clock care, $12, $14, $15,000 a month, because there's nothing in the market that speaks to them and makes them excited, which we plan to solve, or there's a lot of people being inappropriately placed in skilled nursing. So when I was in the community, I heard over and over and over again about situations in which we'd be more than happy to take care of someone, but they were being referred to skilled nursing facilities. Many of the skilled nursing facilities in Lake Charles are either hospitals that have been converted or hotels that have been converted. When I tell you, these are some of the most drab, sad, depressing places. It's just incredible what we're able to offer at a lower price than many of these skilled nursing facilities that many people are being referred to. So just to give you kind of a little idea about the numbers on the project, I don't want to spend too much time on this because it's kind of beyond the scope of this webinar, but basically the goal of the project is to refinance the project between months 37 to 48. And what that's going to do is it's going to cause almost the entirety of investor capital to be returned at that point. And then of course you can see we cash flow for, another 3, 4, 5 years, and then we go ahead and dispose of the asset around year 10, which is going to cause a total return of about 238% or a net profit of 138%. So someone that invests $100,000 in the project would over the course of 10 years get back around $238,000. And that produces an internal rate of return at 16.47%. So this just kind of gives you an idea. I like this because it gives you an idea of kind of the timeline. So if you look on the left, says construction begins November 2018. We actually started doing the dirt work a little later than that. We really kind of started the dirt work in December. So right now there's dirt work being done on the site. We're getting the site ready for construction. Our goal is to have construction complete sometime around November of 2019. And we're also allowing for about 4 months of licensing from the Louisiana Department of Health. The first residents move in March 2020. And then basically within about 18 months or so, we hope to have the project stabilized, meaning that it's performing at the level that we anticipate. And you can also see in between the initial licensing period that we achieve kind of positive cash flow about 7 or 8 months after the initial opening. Now, on the right here, you can kind of see a revenue and operating expenses. This is kind of a sort of 20,000 foot view of what we're anticipating. This is a typical year. So we're anticipating the project's going to produce about $550,000 in cash flow. You can look in the lower right-hand corner, the debt coverage ratio. For those of you in the finance business, generally projects that have a 1.2, 1.25 debt coverage ratio are able to be underwritten by a bank. This one in a typical year is going to be almost a two debt coverage ratio, so it's very favorable by the lender. We have been able to secure very favorable financing terms. And then in the lower left-hand corner, you can see that there is a management fee paid to the operator. The reason we have that in place is because for any reason I'm not able to perform, or if there's any problems or issues, we need to have enough room in the deal to hire a third party to come in and take that over. Obviously, our anticipation is for me and Sage Oak to manage the project all the way through to fruition. But obviously, we have to allocate for that in the deal, because if something happens to me, we need to be able to pay a third party to come in. We also do have asset management fee to make sure that the asset is being well taken care of. There's no deferred maintenance, things like that. So this is an example of the site plan for you. So this is an approximation of what the site plan looks like. Ultimately, what I want you to notice is a couple of key things. Number one, if you look at it, it looks like a residential neighborhood, right? The houses, the backs face each other. The front of the house is basically facing right here. And then You have a nice pond that we plan to make. It's obviously a retention pond, but the idea is to make it look nice. Now, when you come into the project, everything shaded in blue here is going to be the phase 2 constructions. Remember, I said that phase 2 is going to have 5 16-bed houses. One of the key selling propositions right here is the admin building. And the reason why this is important is that the process of selling or touring assisted living or dementia care involves asking a lot of personal questions. It involves a lot of fact finding. And so doing that in the presence of other residents or, other families and caregivers and a lot of chaos going around, the bottom line is we think that that's not the best environment. So we do have a standalone sales and admin building. The other thing you'll notice is the shapes of the house are kind of unusual. It's not because we love architecture, although we do. We did that because we wanted to avoid long hallways. So one of the advantages of residential assisted living is that you don't have to worry about long hallways. And so we designed our house essentially in little quadrants. So you have 4 bedrooms in one quadrant, another 4 bedrooms in another quadrant. So you really kind of break up the hallways. And then the last thing is you see phase 3, which is kind of shaded slightly differently. That's the potential room on the site to build 3 additional houses for a total of 48 beds. Phase 3 is very exciting, and here's why. If someone invests in phase 2, they're going to get the opportunity to invest in the phase 3 construction. However, they don't have to. So if you invest in phase 2, and let's say you decide you don't want to participate in the phase 3 project, you're still going to benefit in 2 very key ways. Number one is we're going to have to sell the land from phase 2 to phase 3. So the phase 2 investors are going to get a pretty substantial payday of around $1.1 million when the land is sold, which is not accounted for in the business plan. So the 16.4% internal rate of return does not take into consideration that phase 3 is going to happen. So it's really important to understand that we have not modeled that in our business plan. So it only improved from there. The other thing is this. When we have 128 beds versus 80 beds, we don't need another van. We don't need another executive director. So there's many things that can be shared amongst those houses. So there's many things that would be being shared amongst 5 houses that'll go to being shared by 8 houses. So the important thing to understand is the common expenses will go down for phase 2 investors. So obviously the phase 2 investors stand to gain quite a bit, both in improved cash flow, an improved exit, because obviously when you improve cash flow on a deal, when you go to sell it, that means it's worth more. And then of course, just the infusion of capital whenever we sell the land from phase 2 to phase 3. So the important thing to remember is that if we do a phase 3, it is an option. The phase 2 investors have an option to invest in phase 3. It's not a requirement, although we do anticipate if the project's successful, many of the phase 2 investors are going to want to invest in phase 3. So that is a scaled down version of our business plan and kind of our offering that we put together. Many of you have not seen that business plan, and so what we wanted to do was give you an opportunity to request a copy of that, so you can actually take some time to review, the documents and things of that nature. To give you an idea where things stand, we currently have about $4 million raised of the 4.7. So we have about $4 million of the $4.7 million raised. And so we're needing about $800,000 to complete the project. Currently, we're asking for $100,000 minimums to be invested by an accredited investor, and we'll have a third party verify your accredited investor status. We can do that in a couple of ways, but I don't want to go too far down that path right now. What I'd love for you to do is, if you're interested in learning more about the project, please shoot me an email or give me a call, tomorrow or this evening, and we'll be happy to get you on the potential investor list, give you a copy of the full business plan. So with that, the presentation is complete, and I'd love to open it up for questions. For those of you that would like to ask a couple of questions about the project, we would love to, see what we can do to help. So the first question we have, go ahead, Gene.
I just want to jump in and just say, Loe and Victor, you did a fantastic job of laying that out. And I have to tell you, as much as I know about the project, you've enlightened me to some new things here. I'm very excited about what I've seen, what I've heard, and knowing you too, I'm very happy to be a part of this myself. But I just want to say, great job. Well done.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You're welcome to up your investment as well. So that always.
Hey, may just do that.
Okay.
I know there's not much room, but I'm going to let others ask questions.
Absolutely. So it looks like Karen was having a problem with freezing, but hopefully we got that taken care of. Um, let's see. Does anybody have any questions? You can just type in the chat box and I can unmute you if you'd like. If you want to ask it verbally, that's fine, or you can type in the chat box there if you have any questions. I'll give you guys gals a couple of minutes. So we have a question here. Someone said, I'm interested in bringing in my pool of investors. Perfect. Just send us an email and we can have a conversation about that. Appreciate that. Any question related to that, or hey, that's a great thing to say. Okay. When do we start seeing a return on our investment? Great question. So the way we've set the project up is during the construction and during the stabilization period, we've actually set up a preferred distribution for investors. And so even though there's no cash flow from the project, we've set aside money in the project to go ahead and pay investors around 4%. It's a little bit more than that, about 4% at the end of year one and about 4% at the end of year two. And then the project will naturally start to cash flow from there. So I hope that answers your question. And of course, send me an email. I'll get you a copy of the business plan, and then we can jump on a private phone call to make sure that that is clear.
Let me add something to that one,
Sure.
just Low. On this project, as with all of our projects, we recognize that many investors are coming into a project like this with cash flow in mind. And whenever you're dealing with new construction, if it's going to take a year, year and a half, 2 years to get fully operational, people don't like to hold their breath for that long. So we put an interest reserve, no different than we put an interest reserve in the budget for the construction lender, really to pay out that preferred distribution, recognizing that there is a need for cash flow even during the construction phase.
All right. So let's see here. I'm having a little trouble with the scrolling here. So the first thing is, the next question is, how would you like us organized? I'm not sure I understand that question, Karen. I can unmute you if you'd like, and then you can ask it if you want to clarify that a little bit. Let me find you here. Where is Karen? Not seeing Karen. Did we lose? There she is. Okay, Karen, you're unmuted. So if you want to clarify the organization question.
Yeah, so I'm bringing investors to the table for, any opportunities that might come by and be made available through the, RAL community, and this is one of them. So as a syndication, would you just like us to present as an LLC that's investing in the project, or how would you like us better organized than an LLC?
Sure, and obviously Victor can jump in, but I think at this point, probably best we have that conversation kind of on the side. But ultimately, there are some broker rules that would come into play here, and so the main thing is that obviously people have to be active in the deal to raise capital for it. So we'll have to kind of talk about what your goals are, what you hope to do. I mean, there's a couple options that you could have, but I'm not certain that it would be easy and the most appropriate place to have it on the webinar. So just please shoot me an email, and then we can set up a time to chat privately. We'll also have some future deals as well that may work really well. So if we can't figure something out on this one, then we can certainly have this conversation for future as well.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm looking forward to. Thanks, Lo.
Perfect. All right, perfect. Shoot me an email and we'll definitely get on that call. All right, so back to the other questions here.
So the next question was from Ron. When would first cash flow begin after? I think we kind of answered that.
Yeah, so let me go back to the slide. I'll come back to the my email section. Let me just pull that slide up so Ron can see that. So it is right here. So Ron, you can see on this slide right here that basically based on this timeline that we're anticipating positive cash flow to be achieved so opening in March, so 3/20 would be when the license is granted. And around September of 2020 is when positive cash flow would be achieved. Obviously, if construction, say, gets delayed a month, then everything will kind of move along a month. We've built in some decent spots to outperform. Like, for example, if we complete the construction in November of 2019, we've allowed 4 months to get licensed. It may only take 1 month. So we built in a couple of pain points along the way to hopefully speed up the process when possible. So Ron, if that answers your question, awesome. If it doesn't, please type something in the chat box. I can definitely unmute you if you need to. It sounds like Victor is going to be running the questions because I'm having a
So
little
next question
difficulty.
from Joseph. How much per month do you expect to charge the tenants, and do they pay any cash deposit up front?
Got it. So one thing to keep in mind is, tenants, that would be a rental property. These would be residents, so a little bit different. I only like to say that because obviously when you hear the word tenant, people think of the word eviction. Don't have a lot of those in senior housing. So we have three different classes of house. One of the great things about doing a planned care home community is this. First, you can do different levels. So we have a assisted living house, we have a luxury assisted living house, and then we have a memory care house. The average rents vary depending upon the class, but the assisted living house is modeled for around $4,500 per month, all the way up to the memory care house, which is modeled just under $6,000 per month. So you've got kind of a range of around $4,500 to about $6,000 a month. There is an upfront deposit required. We do a community fee or a refurbishment fee, and they vary depending upon the class of house that you choose. But the average will be about $2,500, and we have confirmed that that is pretty standard in the marketplace there. And most assisted living and memory care facilities do have some sort of community or refurbishment fee. This brings up a really awesome opportunity to mention. We have paid pretty good money for a very reputable feasibility company to come in and confirm our numbers. The other thing to keep in mind here too is we had a lender underwrite this entire deal and feel comfortable enough to loan $7.7 million on the project. So not only has we had a feasibility study come in, we've also had this essentially stress tested by a local bank. This bank primarily operates out of Louisiana. They do have a Dallas branch as well, but they primarily operate out of Louisiana, know the Lake Charles market very, very well. And actually, they were instrumental in making a couple tweaks in our business plan. So our lender in this case is certainly a partner, and we wanted to use a local lender because, frankly, if we use a local lender and the teller has a grandmother, that grandmother's probably going to move in with us. And so it makes sense for us to partner with a local lender. In this case, we found a great one in B1 Bank. Is there any other questions that I'm not seeing, Victor?
Next question is, are there other projects planned in the area? Do we anticipate a pickup in competitive projects?
So we have been keeping and that's a great question. We've been keeping our eye out for additional projects, and we haven't seen anything. There is one new construction project, which is an expansion of an existing facility. We really have, which Graywood. We have basically one sort of reasonable competitor in the marketplace. They're very different, and we don't necessarily see them as being a huge competitor, but they are probably similar in price. They're a big building, pretty dated right now, very builder grade. They're managed very well. I've spoken to the executive director on many occasions. They're a well-run company, but they are managed by a third-party management company out of Oregon. And so we feel like being more local is huge. And then, of course, offering the small boutique 16-bed experience is going to be totally different, brand new construction. That's surely going to be a game changer in terms of what's in the marketplace. They're expanding, and I believe they're wrapping up a memory care, dementia care wing of their project. Just to give you an idea, our feasibility study studied that and looked at basically how much additional room Lake Charles could stand. So the national average for assisted living is about 88% occupancy. For memory care, it's about 87%. Lake Charles, when we did the feasibility study, was at 96% for memory care, 95% for assisted living. So it's already a very tight assisted living and dementia care market, but also you're also having population growth as well. So really an awesome opportunity in Lake Charles. We're very excited about that, and we're very excited to go into the market with our unique selling proposition being the planned care home community.
Let me jump in and say one more thing, Loe.
Sure.
In Louisiana, the Department of Health defines a couple of different levels. So they define what are called level 2 facilities and level 3 facilities. Level 2 is what we're building, and that license is good for up to 16 beds per home.
Correct.
Once you go to level 3, 17 or more, the building standards change, not from a safety point of view, but basically each residence space becomes a mini apartment, and that's defined in the code. So you have to have your own sitting area, you have to have your own kitchen, all of that. You're basically building a mini apartment. So even from a space standpoint, just square footage, we will outcompete all of the level 3 facilities. All other things being equal, will outcompete them because we're building a level 2 facility where we can dedicate less square footage and still offer superior care. So we think that's a very significant competitive advantage just because of the way that we've mapped the product to the licensing.
Yeah, and one thing to mention too about the design is the project design. So I was in charge of the design of the floor plan. So this is a custom design floor plan for the 16 beds that we're doing. The architect is taking into consideration the site plan in terms of where's the light coming from. This is a very, very well designed product. So much so that I bought the rights of the floor plan to use on subsequent projects and will be reusing this floor plan on additional projects. So we're very excited about the design aspect and little things like sight lines and natural light and just everything placed where it's supposed to go. So it really does offer us a huge advantage because we're going into this with putting the resident first. And many of the stuff that's been built before really didn't have that approach. It was kind of we'll just build it and they'll kind of deal with what we build. And our approach has been very much focused on the resident experience, the family experience, the caregiver experience to ensure that all legs of the stool that Gene refers to are well taken care of.
Next question, how much do we still need to raise? I think it's
Yeah,
700,000, right?
Yeah, about 800,000, 700,000. So I think we got 4 million. So yeah, 4 million raised of about 4.7. So we have about $700,000. We're doing minimum units of 100,000. So we have around 7 units left. Obviously, we've got quite a few things in conversation. So we could have as few as 3 to 4 units left or as many as 7.
Next question, how can I share the video with investor friends in case they're interested?
So we're going to, that's a great question. We're going to record this webinar. We'll do a little bit of editing and we'll probably have that out in the next couple of days. We'll be sure to send that out to everybody that was on the webinar. And then also we'll send that to you and you're welcome to share it. Just one little note, there's multiple different ways to raise capital. This one is being raised as a 506C as in cat. What that means is that we are allowed to generally solicit, so you can share the video with other folks. The one key is when you generally solicit, you have to only take accredited investors. So if you have any questions about that, please email me. But ultimately, this project can only take accredited investors, so we cannot take non-accredited investors. Basically just means that the federal government has said you earn a certain amount of money, have a certain amount of net worth, and that means that you should understand how to evaluate risk. So that's the federal government rules that we're playing by, but this is a 506C, so you are allowed to share the video, and we'll be happy to get you a copy.
Loe, can you do us a favor and put the contact information back on the screen so everybody make sure they have that as well?
Yeah, fully intended to do that. Thank you, sir.
This is why
Gene Guarino is the man.
Next question, emergency planning for climate change. Why don't I field that one? So this property is about 19 miles inland. So we're very far from the coast. We're 18 feet above sea level. We are not in a flood zone. And we feel quite comfortable with the property from that point of view. But whenever you talk about Louisiana, and this question always comes up, the number one question in Louisiana when you talk about land is people say, is it wet? And that's always an important question. It is not wet, which means we don't have to deal with any wetland remediation or anything like that. It is a good, buildable, developable land. We've had geotechnical surveys done where they, drill boreholes into the ground, look at the soil composition, make sure it's stable enough to support a building, and so on. So we're quite comfortable with that.
Yeah, another point on that is that obviously you can raise the pad sites up, and so our pad sites, Victor, quote me, make sure if I'm right about this, but I believe we're 19 feet up. The nearby road is 15 feet. So we're about, 4 feet higher than that. And local folks that we've talked to have said water has never crested that road. So essentially, there's been no historical example of any major weather event that would cause this project any problems. We've worked with a top tier civil engineer team that knows Lake Charles very, very well to make sure that we have a great plan in place to basically discharge water if we do get a heavy rain event. And so that's one of the reasons why you saw the retention pond. The nice thing is, as Victor mentioned, we have an apartment complex adjacent to us, and they have a retention pond as well, because essentially we have 24 acres of site. Even though this project is only about 6.5 acres, we are partners, and Victor, being one of them, is a partner on all the projects. And so the nice thing is we can coordinate with our neighbors, and so we've done that. And so our site plan is really designed to make sure that the residents are going to stay safe, and even things as simple as having a backup generator in place as part of the project design. So we really have taken weather into consideration. We've had a lot of crazy weather in Dallas over the last few years, and so that's really opened my eyes up to being prepared. And so I think that site will reflect that level of preparation.
Next question, does each unit of 16 beds have a common dining area with its own cooking staff?
Yeah, so the absolutely great question. Yes, it will have all food will be cooked in-house. The dementia care and the luxury assisted living will have a chef, and then the assisted living will have a caregiver prepared meal. So one of the key differentiators between going from assisted living to luxury assisted living is the white hat chef experience. We've also added the chef in the dementia care unit because we feel like if we can get the caregivers to focus on care and things of that nature and not have to worry about meal prep, that'll be a positive. So initially 4 out of the 5 houses will have chefs, and then 1 out of the 5 houses will have caregiver prepared meals. I use caregiver prepared meals now in Dallas. I know Gene does caregiver prepared meals at 2 of his 3 houses. Caregiver prepared meals work out really well, but ultimately the chef is kind of a selling point and something that people really like. And keep in mind, these are open kitchens. These are open dining areas, so it's basically just a really big house. One thing too is we did consult with the design team to ensure that we have things like our island has 2 heights of the counter. One height designed for a chef or the caregivers to cook food. We also have a lower height island to allow residents in wheelchairs to participate in the process, to be able to wheel up to basically the island bar and participate and do those things. So one of the things we really tried to do is make this a house that really does think about the residents. It's not just a house, it's a house designed specifically for this.
It's going to feel like Thanksgiving every night.
That's right.
Next question, are you using green technology? That's a huge question because there's so many different facets to it, but let me touch on a couple of things that we are doing. Number one, there are a number of different standards when it comes to green building. Historically, that was things like LEED. Today, what we focus more on is something called WELL, which is, are you using materials that are healthy from a chemical standpoint? We don't want a lot of off-gassing of materials, and so it's really about making sure that we focus on the health of the residents. So that's an important element. Second is low voltage LED lighting, things like that. So again, choice of materials. Certainly to that extent, yes. Certain materials we choose very specifically because we are building assisted living. So for example, we want flooring that's going to be a little bit more resilient than we don't want people to be falling on concrete. So, it's got to have a little bit of a cushion to it and things like that. That does restrict some of the choice of materials. It means putting a little bit more plastic than we might otherwise, but it makes for a better, end customer experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think we're down to the final pieces right here, and I think it's a good time to wrap. What do you guys think?
Sure, absolutely.
There was one more question. You sell out.
Yeah.
So the question was,
Go ahead. You answer that, then I want to give a little piece at the end. Go ahead.
Sure.
Go ahead. So the question, if I understand the question correctly, it's we're projecting a sale at year 10 in the pro forma.
That's
So
correct.
one of the other things, and I know things froze up a little bit inside there, but go ahead, Loe, you wanted to add some more.
Yeah, keep in mind what this was a, maybe the business plan was 40 pages and we shared maybe 15 or 16 pages that would work on the webinar. So the primary goal here, obviously we do want to answer questions, but there are some questions that will be answered by sending you the business plan and also just scheduling private conversations. So if we missed your question or you want us to dive down a little bit more, please, shoot us a text, send us an email, and we'll get you on the list, get you the full business plan, and be happy to have a private one-on-one conversation with you or anybody you feel want to be involved. So and then finally, before I hand it over to Gene, thank you so much for participating. Really enjoyed sharing this project, and we're really excited about this. And we've talked a lot about making money and making return for investors, and that's really important. But ultimately, we're very excited about what this is going to do for the community. Some of the things that I saw when I was visiting the marketplace, doing the market survey, just lets me know that this project is so very much needed. And so this is an opportunity both to invest and make money, but also, as Gene says, do good and do well. And so there's a lot of people that are going to benefit from this project.
And I just want to kind of bring it all together and say this was an opportunity for these two to present this project to you. They've been working hard and long on this, and really they're at the tail end of this capital raise. So if this is something you're looking to do, it's going to fill quickly. It will sell out in regards to your investment opportunities. So do take advantage of it. Reach out to them. They can obviously answer any and all questions that you have, but if it's something you want to do, you're always looking for a great project, which you have, and you also have great operators and people involved. So I'm involved, and I'm excited that you guys had a chance to share this, and everyone here listening. It will be recorded. You'll have a chance to share it with others, but don't hesitate to take action before it does fill and sell out.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone, and we'll get that sent out to everybody. Thank you, Victor.
Thank you.
Good night,
Have
everybody.
a great night.
And behind the scenes, thank you, Isabel. As everyone knows, everything that happens at the RAL Academy, Isabel is somewhere in the background. So she's been running this in the background. So thank you so much, Isabel.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.